All right, chapter 4, Phoenicians. Having identified the Aryan race with the Adamic or white Caucasian race originating in the mountains of Central Asia, let us now turn to the so called Phoenicians, who were known to be the leading pioneers, merchants, inventors, and mariners of antiquity who, coming from north of the Persian Gulf, kept pushing eastward to the shores of the Mediterranean, sailing in their galleys along the coastlands of the Mediterranean, following the setting sun through the Pillars of Hercules, sailed northward along the Atlantic seaboard of Europe into Britain, along the coast of Africa, rounded the Cape of Good Hope, and even crossed the Atlantic to the shores of South and Central America, as we have record of. Let us bear in mind here that it was the Greeks who gave these ancient mariners and colonizers the name of Phoenicians, and they existed for a period of over 1,000 years before the Greeks and continued in name until the Christian era. Their language, the Punic, being the commercial language of antiquity as English is today. Let us now analyze the word Phoenician or Phoenicia. Professor George Rawlson, in his story of Phoenicia, tells us that Phoenicia derived its name from the forests of date or phoenix palms which grew there in great luxuriance. So far, so good, but whence did the phoenix palm derive its name? Harapallos says a palm branch was the symbol of the phoenix. Yes, but what or who was the phoenix? Sanchoniathon, the Phoenician writer, states that Phoenix was the first Phoenician. Phoenix then was a man. Now, the word Phoenix is the Greek form of the Egyptian term Hanuk, the house of Enoch. In Hebrew, Enoch is also Hanok. Thus, the mystery of the ancient race is solved. They were the sons and descendants of Enoch and of Noah and his three sons, who after the flood started their westward march. Their descendants have kept it up since, settled first north of the Persian Gulf in the bushlands of Mesopotamia, where they found a dusky race in an occupation of the land, the ancient Sumerians, and from thence towards the Mediterranean. See Plate 4. Chambers of Encyclopedia. In the article, Phoenicia gives us the following account of the origin of the Phoenicians, page 136, volume 8. Two accounts have come down to us of the origin of the Phoenicians according to Herodotus, Strabo, Pliny, and others. They dwelt anciently on the shores of the Persian Gulf, whence they crossed by land to Syria and settled on the coast of the Mediterranean. Herodotus declares this to be their own account of themselves, and Strabo says that there was a similar tradition among the inhabitants of the Gulf who showed in proof of it. Phoenician temples on some of the islands. Justin, on the contrary, in his epitome of Trogus Pompeius, declares that they were driven out of their country by an earthquake and passed to the Mediterranean. The last account taken from Justin again corroborates our story. The Phoenicians were driven out of their own country by an earthquake, which is the earthquake that caused the deluge when the fountains of the deep were broken up in the Tarim Basin. The 10th and 11th chapters of Genesis give us the register of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, for they had sons born to them after the deluge. A quote here from chapter 10, the first verse of the Fenton translation of the Bible, which is expressed in modern English. The fifth verse reads, "From these they spread themselves over the sea coasts of the countries of the nations, each with their languages amongst the Gentile heathen tribes." Verses 31 and 32. These are the sons of Shem by their tribes and by their languages in their countries among the heathen. The above were the families of the sons of Noah and their descendants by tribes. From them they spread themselves among the nations on the earth after the flood. These verses give us clearly to understand that the sons of Noah spread themselves among the existing heathen nations of that time, and by their mental and physical superiority subdued and mastered them. All the country was agreed for settled objects, but some of them marching from the east arrived at a plain in the bushland and halted there. Genesis 11, 1 and 2. The plain in the bushland is the plain of Shinar, which means bushland, and there arose suddenly a new civilization started by the Aryan or noble race, who were considered by native Sumerians as gods. Plate 4 shows an ancient statue of an Aboriginal Sumerian. Like the white Europeans settling in South Africa are called South Africans, even though the native South Africans are black, so are the Adamites settling in Samaria being called Sumerians by our age generally, while in reality they should be called Akkadians. The Encyclopedia Britannica under Summer and Akkad shows that the terms Sumerian and Akkadian are interchangeable and both refer to the people of early Mesopotamia. But it also appears that the term Sumerian should be applied more to the Aboriginal blacks and Akkadians to the invading Adamites. As the word summer is derived from Shinar, the bushland, it indicates therefore that Sumerian applies to the Aboriginals? No, Aborigines. On the other hand, the word Akkad means mountains and corroborates our contention, that the Akkadians and Aryans came from the mountains. Mr. Davidson, in his notes to Chart 30 of his Babylonian in Central Asia, says that immigration into West Asia of the survivors of the parent body of the Adamic race of Central Asia in the 23rd century BC begins a new chapter in the history of the race. In their landlocked earth, they have been one language and one speech. This condition, the survivors of the new race endeavor to perpetuate in the settlement in Babylonia. By building an imposing city and tower, they hoped to re-centralize the race. In this aim, they were defeated and were scattered abroad amongst the primitive races and the descendants of the early Adamic settlers, that they might not understand one another's speech. In the 10th chapter of Genesis, therefore, in what Professor Sayce discovered to be a statement of the geographical distribution of the white race, the races of the Gentile world are described as territorially subdivided according to the families of the sons of Noah, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. The earliest Adamic settlers in Babylonia and Egypt introduced organized cultivation into the valleys of the Tigris, Euphrates, and Nile. The low-lying river flats were reclaimed from the rule of the annual flood, and scientific irrigation was established to bring life and prosperity to age-long neglected swamps and alluvial wastes. The swamp age, when the annual flood held its devastating rule, was long afterwards remembered in Babylonia, and later Babylonian references to this time confused the ruling conditions then with the conditions of the latter deluge in Central Asia. The Sumerian account of the WB Prism 444 therefore states that the deluge entered the land and that only 5 cities existed in the times described as preceding the so-called post-diluvian period. These 5 cities are Eridu, Batbara, Larak, Sapar, and Surapek. The beginning of history is placed at Eridu, the city of the water god, Ea, Enki, god of wisdom and mysteries. This clearly means that the first Adamic settlement was found at Eridu on the ancient coastline of the Persian Gulf, and that by the time the other 4 cities were all established, Babylonia had been reclaimed from the rule of the entering flood. At this time, I wish to say that there are evidences which indicate that enterprising adventurers of the Adamites left their Asiatic mountain home all through the 16th centuries that preceded the flood and established colonies in various parts of the earth. In fact, there is good reason to believe that Cain, who became a wanderer, migrated into the valley of the Euphrates as early as 3800 BC and brought with him the first civilization and also the devil worship, as he was the evil one, the devil, as Paul expressed it. Many historians place the beginning of the Babylonian at 3800 BC. Cain is also believed to have been the originator of the Chinese dragon worship. We refer to Sargon the Magnificent by Mrs. Bristow. It is generally accepted that the kings of the first six dynasties of Egypt were of the Aryan race, and with them, Egypt's high civilization suddenly developed. Undoubtedly, the Minoan civilization of Crete derived its origin from early Adamic pioneers also, and of course, we know today that the Great Pyramid was built 300 years before the deluge by an architect and master masons of the Adamites who came into Egypt for that purpose and then departed again. Regarding this, Mr. Davidson makes the following comment. To enable the massive works of construction that were planned in each primitive country to be executed to the building standard of the building race, the primitive natives races were trained on a mass production basis of organization to participate in the execution of highly skilled work in successive relays of semi-skilled and unskilled labor. In the case of the Great Pyramid, it is essential that the unskilled native workmen should be instructed in successive stages in the art of quarrying and in the handling and transportation by land and water of large masses of stone. It was necessary also that the principles of mass masonry design and construction should be acquired by the Egyptian native workmen, and that these principles should be developed to perfection under Egyptian conditions. About 2 centuries passed in the acquirement of this necessary experience and in experience that comprised the experimental construction of many minor works in masonry and several types of pyramid design before the requisite standard of workmanship was attained for the construction of the Great Pyramid. With this standard attained, the Great Pyramid was built to monumentalize the supreme achievement in mass masonry construction within the entire span of all ages of material civilization, and to enshrine therein in comparatively imperishable form the revelation of the gospel of salvation and the revelation of the gospel of the kingdom of heaven and earth. With the coming of the Adamic survivors, the sons of Noah, whom we have identified as the Aryan Phoenicians, begins the history of the various kingdoms of Mesopotamia. The 10th chapter of Genesis tells us in verses 8 to 10 of Nimrod, the mighty hunter, and the capitals of his kingdom were Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calneh in the bushland, Shinar. The King James Version says the beginning of his kingdom. In neither version is it stated that Nimrod founded these cities, but rather that he extended his rule over them, which again confirms the belief that the Adamites or the Aryan Phoenicians came into Chaldea, conquered it, and gave it the benefit of their civilization and culture. It is quite possible indeed that Sargon of Akkad, who conquered Babylon in 2231 BC, is the Nimrod of Scripture. The name of the mound of Nimrod covering the remains of Nineveh commemorates his name. It is to this period that the later Greek writers trace the origin of the Phoenicians, who began their trading and navigation first along the shores of the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean, and after their occupation of Canaan along the coastlands of the Mediterranean. We must, of course, always bear in mind that in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd centuries after the Adamic deluge, i.e., in the 23rd, 22nd, 21st, and 20th centuries BC, the Aryan Phoenicians could not have been very numerous in population, but every one of them counted and left his influence among the natives in the same way that the Anglo-Saxon missionaries or traders of our time leave a lasting influence, for good or bad, among the natives of Central Africa or Oceania. From Genesis 10, 6:20, it will be seen that Nimrod was a son of Ham as well as was Canaan, after whom the land of Canaan was named. As upon Ham and his descendants had fallen the curse of Noah, we can readily see that the branch of the Phoenicians most readily fell into the vices of the aboriginal Sumerians and too readily adopted the worship of Baal and all its abominations. And in the midst of an otherwise high civilization, for instance, that the Hittites, who were the sons of Heth, a son of Canaan. Of Japheth's sons, we read in Genesis 10 to 5. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, and Madai, and Javan, and Thobal, and Meshech, and Theras. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Thothgarma. And the sons of Javan, Ion, Elishah, and Tharish, Kittim, and the Dodonim. And these they spread themselves over the sea coasts of the countries of the nations, each with their language among the Gentile tribes. Fenton. Apparently, they were the first to spread themselves along the coastlines of the countries. Three of the names of the particular interest to us here, Gomer, Javan, and Tarshish. Gomer means darkness. Ptolemy on his map of the world has England named Javan, which or Jovan? No, it's Javan? Javan, which seems to indicate that some of Javan's descendants settled there. After Tarshish, the son of Javan, ancient Spain was named, or in fact, it seemed the whole of the maritime possessions of ancient Israel, as we read in 1 Kings 10:22, 22 to 48, and 2 Chronicles 9:21, and also in Jonah 1:3. Let us now turn to the line of Shem, who was the father of the children of Heber, i.e., the Iberi, Abari, or Hebrews. Until this day, it is common usage to think of the Hebrews as the Jews, and even learned professors and doctors of divinity speak of them as one and the same people. Scripture makes a sharp distinction between the house of Israel and Judah, as the present writer has shown in his Destinies of Israel and Judah. And from chapter 12 of this book, it will be seen that the Jews of today do not even represent the whole house of Judah. The word Eber or Heber means colonizer in the Hebrew Phoenician language, and it is a striking fact that his descendants, the Hebrew Phoenicians, have been the greatest colonizers and mariners in the world from the time that they settled in the bushland of Chaldea 22 centuries BC until this day, dominating every race with whom they came in contact. The centuries following the deluge compose one of the most dynamic epochs of history. For during that time, there arose along the Euphrates and Tigris the Chaldean civilization, which has baffled the archaeologists since it arose within such a short period, like that of the Egyptian during the Pyramid Age a few centuries before it. And the only explanation that can be given for the sudden development of both is that the Egyptian had its conception through the influx of the Aryan pyramid builders before the deluge, and the Chaldean through the influx of the sons of Noah, the sons of Enoch, the Aryan Phoenicians, among whom the Semites easily took the leading part. This then explains this advanced state of scientific achievement, which, nope, see, how long have I been going? Yeah, it looks like I can get about 15 minutes right now. And then I gotta stop. So I'm working on it, people. I'm working on it.